Welcome to my very first ever podcast, where we're going to spend a bit of time over the next 40 minutes talking about technology and leadership with two fantastic leaders from our industry. So to begin with, I'd like to introduce you to Khalid Aziz, who works in Signify, and Jim Estes, who heads up Dense Air. We're going to talk technology, we're going to talk data, we're going to talk a bit of security. We are going to talk about your leadership journeys and personal lessons that you've learned on those journeys. And then I think we'll finish up with a fun quickfire Q&A. So really looking forward to it. Let's go. So if I can start with, could you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you do, and how you feel about the world and opportunities of connectivity?
Let me start. First of all, thank you so much, Pat, for the opportunity. And indeed, a quick introduction for Signify. The easiest way I tend to put it is the brightest spot on Earth after sun. We are the largest lighting company in the world, with a heritage that goes back to Philips and almost 120 years. So very anonymous to anything that's related to lighting in the world of lighting, for that matter. While we've been around for long, I think one of the key reasons we are is continuous innovation and continuous development into new areas. And my responsibility at Signify is really to build out those portfolios and develop those markets which are beyond our conventional lighting businesses. So that's my responsibility at Signify.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim.
Well, thank you as well. Really enjoy the opportunity to be here talking about this today. Dense Air we develop software to operate neutral host. We really design, build, and maintain, operate small cell networks. In the US in particular is more indoor. I mean, here we're really looking at providing this neutral host capability and the interface to the mobile network operators so that radio network operators can go deploy without having to worry about that. We provide the service assurance wrapper around that to make sure that we're meeting the KPIs and the service level agreements that are required to operate the network. The software itself is based on technology that's been evolved. We really started in the neutral host business 3 or 4 years ago. We're a startup, small company. We have facilities right here in the UK, not too far away in Marlow, but also in the United States. And we develop our own software in-house because what we need, we can't buy, right? So we feel like we've really innovated in this area, and we're getting very positive interactions with mobile network operators here in the UK, but also in the United States with all the major tier 1 mobile network operators, because they really are looking for someone to act as their kind of neutral arbiter to go allow all these other build-outs to occur. So.
And can I ask you a quick question? Because there may be people listening to the pod who don't know what neutral host means. So can you both just give me a couple of seconds on what is neutral host?
Yeah, so neutral host, basically, I'll just say we're the Switzerland here, okay? We work with all the different mobile network operators, and when we're connecting different people, we create this environment that allows different parties to actually interact with those mobile network operators in a defined interface, so they don't have to manage all of that. I mean, if every single person that went out there tried to do that, I mean, it's a very complex problem. We do that once, basically, with all the mobile network operators, perform the integration into their core, and then meet the security requirements that they have and all the different things that they would want from anyone. But we do that in a way where we do that once and everyone else can then benefit from that. And we do it using shared infrastructure. And I think the key thing here is shared active infrastructure. If you think about the tower model, you go back, we're really sharing steel, right? You're sharing the passive elements of the site. Here we're actually sharing the active electronics, okay, which provide additional economies of scale, both on the the neutral host part, but even all out to the radios to be able to support multiple MNOs on the same radio without having to replicate that multiple times. So it's it's a different form of infrastructure sharing that it's like, to me, I kind of call it Tower 2.0, right? It's the next kind of evolution of that.
I would say this, but it sounds great. Very efficient, very effective, very sustainable, kind of should be cost effective. And yeah, like you say, you know, the opportunity to build it once for multiple users, customers and use cases. I mean, we all obviously around the table very much believe in that case. So, thank you very much indeed. And then Khalid, you come at it from a slightly different angle, which is slightly more the infrastructure side of things. So can you talk a little bit about the kind of infrastructure that you build and sell, and also how it works with this ecosystem that we're talking about?
Absolutely. And I'll bring it back to also the point that you raised, Pat, the definition of neutral host. I think we as consumers are living for a long time the aspect of neutrality of connected infrastructure. Back in the days in our offices, we were running with looking for cables to connect into laptop. Today, any device anywhere within our premise is practically accessing a network that is meant to be neutral, mostly provided from an ISP world. Our vision is the same philosophy can be brought into an outdoor environment where the existing infrastructure can be leveraged to provide a similar ubiquitous connectivity for any device, any requirement, any need. We see that as a foundation pillar of building your house, whether you're driving smart city agenda, whether you're driving densification of data networks, whether it's about broadband connectivity for houses. You essentially can use your existing infrastructure, and that's where we bring in the a very unique asset, which, you know, as common person, we would walk around the streets and we would often see, or, you know, lighting infrastructure being used for all sort of devices cluttered and connected together. We feel that we have a responsibility to simplify that, simplify by innovating how that can be done hundreds and thousand times more. As per the data points, not too far in future, we would see every average square kilometer having more than 1 million devices that are connected in real time for high bandwidth. Where is that infrastructure? And if you start building that from scratch, you can only imagine the consequence, both ecological consequence, environmental consequence. And what our promise is that working with partners like yourselves and jointly creating an ecosystem, you could actually leverage a lot from what is already there. It's powered infrastructures, it's lighting infrastructures, how we can actually bring that as a core heart of the digital landscape to enable connectivity and neutrality of connectivity. Then whether it's MNOs who want to utilize it, whether it's the cities who want to utilize it, with the help of, you know, specialists like yourselves, you sort of facilitate that infrastructure to be leveraged for multi-use cases.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I think there's this additional benefit, which is, you know, we hear quite a lot in the news in the UK at the moment about planning and how planning can either get in the way or can facilitate growth. It's a very big story in the UK, and it's a very, very big focus for the government. I mean, one of the great things about this is you're taking a significant burden off planning authorities, because you will do it and you will do it once and you won't go back again.
On that note, Pat, I actually would like to hear your perspective, because from a value chain perspective, conventionally, TowerCo is a very passive infrastructure, pension fund sweetheart. And now you're kind of breaking the ground to look into, well, you could do a lot more. You can actually transform the business model of the industry altogether by creating neutral host, which is semi-active or even fully active to a large extent. How do you see this transformation, and how do you see Cornerstone leading the pack?
Yeah, I think so. As a business, you know, our heritage was founded by Vodafone and Telefonica, as was now VMO2, as a cost-sharing joint venture. So, you know, great vehicle for putting all your passive assets in and really generating cost savings from that vehicle. And over time, we have evolved very deliberately to the point where, you know, as you say, we've got external investment, we have, and we have a very different approach and attitude now towards how do we support the UK with its passive infrastructure. And I mean, people like Mark Ganzi have been talking about this for a very long time, you know, talking about how you take a core asset, start exploring all the adjacencies that sit around the outside, We touched earlier before we came in here about the meshed nature of connectivity and how it is only active and passive is only become more and more and more meshed. And so we feel that we're kind of really well placed. If we say our territory is passive, it doesn't matter what type of customer, it doesn't matter whether it's road or rail or smart city infrastructure or ports or all the other use cases that we talk about all the time. That passive infrastructure and the creation of neutral host opportunities, we feel that's a great place to invest. And I think investors, you see a very active investment market for passive and passive active neutral host assets. And so, yeah, we just feel it's really close territory and it's certainly something for us to explore and expand into.
And interesting, Pat, from that perspective, also seeing Densair sort of a disruptor in their own domain. You're also disrupting the business model, and maybe a bit more perspective of how the investors are kind of seeing this new ecosystem evolving. And you mentioned, Jim, that a relatively newer player in the market. How do you see from an investor's perspective, where they are eyeing putting these pieces together and what's really exciting them?
Well, it's interesting. The MNOs are capital constrained. They, used to be they had lots of money to spend and they don't anymore. So you start to look at like where are they going to invest and where are the holes that are resulting from the lack of investment in there. And you've got coverage problems. They're not going to go do all this infill and everything. So bringing new sources of capital to the table that's effectively off balance sheet for the MNO, right? I mean, you're building a network that it interfaces to them. Our goal is to make it look like it's part of their network. So all the alarms show up and they're knock. They see a problem. It's as if they owned it. It's a virtual base station in that case. So now you can bring other sources of capital to the table, whether it's financial sources, different strategic sources, even people that are not invested typically in MNOs like a hyperscalers and things like that have a vested interest in seeing as many people connected to their network so they can consume those services. So it's I think bringing these new investors to the table in a way, versus like directly investing in a Vodafone or a VMO2, for example. Now you're able to participate because I spend a lot of time in the private equity world and they always talk about derived demand investment models, right? And you would try to say, well, I can't buy an MNO, but how do I participate in the growth in that industry? This is an ideal opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I think there's a little build on that as well, which is, we all come from different companies. And for a long time, I think the growth of networks and the growth of connectivity was tied to this slightly nebulous collaboration ecosystem, these two words, right? But here's a great example. You, Jim, bring a source of capital, skills, capability, product. Khalid, you bring yours. And then I bring mine. And so it's not one entity trying to swallow the whole slice itself. We all bring that investment. We all bring that attitude towards creating solutions for customers. And we all bring that sort of neutral host. Of course, we do it for ourselves, right? And we do it for our investors. But we also do it for anybody who wants to use that connectivity service. I feel it's far more... it's a far more open approach to creating solutions.
It's really the internet model, if you think about it. You think who runs the internet? Yeah. No one. It's like a flock of birds, right? I mean, this is heading towards that direction, right? Rather than having these groups that are really controlling that asset. It's a very scarce resource spectrum, right? It's like beachfront property, right? So how do you get maximum utilization of that when they're capital constrained? This is the way to do that.
Yeah, and the use cases, I mean, I'm sure, we'll touch on them later on, but the use cases are quite limitless at the moment. It's really pace of adoption and pace of understanding and pace of how the partner ecosystem, the customer need develops, rather than, are there people who know how to do this and can bring capital to bear?
Absolutely, and if I may share on that, Pat and Jim, I think the impact is one aspect is, of course, the impact and the outcome that this drives. The other aspect is the inclusive nature of this neutrality, because you get a major stakeholder like the public sector that is usually on the edge or the end of receiving, the complaints from the end customers for lack of connectivity, for lack of digital infrastructure, and so on. Now they actually become part of solving that problem. So I like the approach you mentioned. It's openness. The openness is also inclusive in nature, because now you're not excluding that this is my network and that this is purely driven by the ROIC in this particular area and so on. But rather, it's everyone is bringing major assets and strengths on the table. Public sector, utility companies, they're building their, bringing their street furnitures to the place. Well, let's utilize it and let's actually expand the nature of that openness and neutrality. And I think this aspect of neutral host is quite unique in nature, because you're allowing a lot of players to contribute to solve the end user's real problem. And I think that's a unique aspect.
I really like that. Genuinely, I really like that, because again, one of those big UK conversations, it started off as levelling up. It's now, it's very much about social and community. It's very much about inclusivity, and these kind of solutions, the ability to expand these solutions. I think you're right. I think they do exactly that.
Absolutely.
When you work with communities, we always had the mantra, dig once is what we called it. So if you think about it, we've all been involved in these things. Let's say one M&O wants to put some small cells in downtown London, let's say. The first time they go in, they dig up the streets, they're pulling fiber and power in, they break up the sidewalk, and it's just really disruptive, and then they're done. And now let's say M&O number 2 wants to do the same thing.
Exactly.
They're not going to co-locate because it wasn't designed that way, so they're going to rip all the streets up again.
Exactly.
And again, so the ability to minimize the impact on the community in terms of this investment of infrastructure with this dig once mantra,
absolutely,
is really well received from we've had this conversation. So
yeah, no, that's great. I've got a question for Khalid, right, which is, accepting that light is a communication medium, the jump from Philips and lights to lights and connectivity, it feels like somewhere someone made quite a brave strategic decision. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
I think many of us don't realize light and communication in a way is inherently in the DNA of someone like Signify. For those of us who come from telco's radio world, light is also a radio medium. It actually carries. We do have communication technologies that actually purely communicate on light spectrum. Doesn't need RF spectrum anymore. So from a core philosophy perspective, we understand the nature of communication as simply part of what we live and breathe in. We just happen to be on the lower end of the spectrum, higher end of the spectrum, which is light, visible light. Now, and then the other part is what I mentioned, being one of the largest player in the lighting industry, we're actually very deeply involved in the IoT transformation that's taking place in the infrastructure that is connected with lighting to electricity to the grid. We see that movement for a long time, how whether those are smart cities, smart buildings, smart stadiums, how that is evolving. And we felt that these are the two areas that gives us the core, sort of the right to actually play being a facilitator, how communication can be advanced further, how densification of networks work. Just to put some data points, Pat, there are over 220 million streetlights globally, increasing at the rate of about 3.5% year on year. Now, with that amount, and the beauty is the street infrastructure of lighting is always built where public is, where people are, where movement is. So it's rightly positioned precisely where densification of data is needed, especially in the outdoor environments. And our approach is really until and unless players that take responsibility, who are part of that industry, to really evolve and take transformative decisions and investments, significant investments, to take to bring in new technologies, it's difficult for newcomers in some infrastructure play to come out and say, well, we would like to bring. There are quite a few disruptors in place, but we believe that we are setting the stage for a lot of companies and businesses to follow, so that down the line in a decade from now, your street infrastructure is your ubiquitous connectivity infrastructure. There's no reason why it should not. It's powered, it's elevated, it's always there where people are. So we felt that there was a genuine space for someone like Signify to really set the innovation trend and drive that innovation of connectivity in that space.
It's still a great move though, because there's loads of other people. Obviously, you're the best, right? But there's loads of other people who make lights, but no one else spotted it, and you spotted it, right? So, which is fab. And Jim, I had a question for you. I mean, you've done a lot of projects, as Den says. So, what is your favourite one and why?
We have a project in Chicago in a very large parking garage. It's 4 million square foot parking garage. It's the largest parking garage in the world. And it's really interesting. You'd think that's pretty boring, right? You just park your car down there. We've started to build that out, and we've learned a lot about how people use communications in that. And it crossed so many different areas. One is, let's say you prepay for your parking, when you go on Spot Hero, and you go to exit, and you pull your phone out to get the QR code, and there's no cellular coverage. And
you're stuck.
It's just a huge queue behind you, and they just finally just lift the gate up and let everybody out.
Is that a lived experience?
So that's like an example. But then, they use that garage for security, right? And in case of an emergency, it's a staging area that they use that. So now they want to have public safety coverage in there, because if you're bringing, you've got let's say it's a weather event like tornado or something, they get them down there to make it safe, or something else. You need to have the public safety connectivity down there. And then they're looking at applications. It's kind of funny. Everybody, it's like the dude, where's my car?
Yeah.
I lost my car.
Good film.
And I don't know where it is, and I don't remember where I parked it. So now they're saying, how could we develop applications that, like, they're looking at the license plates when they go in, they then look where that person parked, and if they want to identify the car, they can say, oh, it's in this stall, in this location, et cetera. So it was really interesting watching all the different use cases that came out of a parking garage. And it's not, we didn't really expect that at first, but it's been fascinating.
Yeah, there's another bit, I think, that's as you talk about those use cases, the thing that sort of flashes through my mind is security. Because obviously there's a lot of data traveling around. There's a lot of information about how people move and how they behave and what they do. How do companies, sort of question to you both, possibly me as well, right? Which is, how do companies make sure that all of that information, that data, that understanding is kept safe?
Well, one of the main functions of a neutral host gateway is really security, right? Because we're inside the MNO's core network, right? So that is the area that'd be very attractive to someone if they wanted to do bad things, right? So having a really robust security framework to protect that is fundamental. They will not let you connect to it. In fact, a lot of the MNOs don't call it a neutral host; they call it a security gateway. Okay, so that's a really big deal. And then you start to look at that, even like the records of the call data and everything. We anonymize that data so it can't be traced, and you can preserve people's privacy on that. But then at the same time, that gives me really powerful data that I can use to optimize a network that I wouldn't have otherwise, right? So it's kind of from the end user all the way back into the network. There's elements of that. We have a security council internally. Actually have a specialist that does nothing but go look at the security related to it. And there's even like ISO standards for protecting data and things like that. So that's just a fundamental part of doing a neutral host.
Yeah.
I can only second that, Pat, from that perspective. I think one is, for organizations like ours, Signify, it's part of our core security framework to have our products fully certified, fully protective. But like Jim mentioned, I think it's the entire chain that needs to kind of follow certain frameworks. And we have to start living with that reality that as long as we are trying to do our parts well, the overall security apparatus starts to really function in tandem. But then, of course, data privacy remains always one of the top priorities for all organizations to ensure that we're keeping it up to the standards and up to the mark there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is so my next question is going to be about what is your favorite or possibly most mind-blowing innovation that you've seen in the last 12 months? And I'm going to kick off with this one. So I went to TMT Finance. There was a satellite panel. And I kind of, I was aware that a lot of satellites going up in the sky and, lots going on. I think 20,000 up there and 50% of those, I could be wrong on these numbers, by the way, but have gone up in the last 18 months. And the conversation turned to, and this was my most mind-blowing innovation, data centers in orbit. Now, who would have thought that was a thing? But there are companies and they are already working on, how do you lift and shift? Because if you're going to have a lot of satellites in the sky, they're going to be processing data, and they're going to be, they're going to be communications mediums. You don't want to be bouncing backwards and forwards, down to Earth and back again in order to kind of store some of that data. So they were talking about literally data centers in orbit. That's mine.
Very interesting. That's thought-provoking. Didn't really come across that bit, but it's in the past year or so, one of the things that's truly inspired me is I've been traveling a lot to Arizona and West Coast lately, and the take-up of really commoditized, commercialized autonomous vehicles on the streets. You can now tap in Waymo around Phoenix, Arizona areas, and so on.
Do you mind talking a little bit about what that Waymo experience is like?
Absolutely.
Because obviously in the UK it's not here yet, but
indeed, and it's a world apart how we perceive that something is coming, while when you are there on the street and you actually just see it happening, business as usual. It is just like an Uber order, except that it's an autonomous vehicle that comes in, opens the door, you sit in it, and absolutely,
really hop on your app.
Yeah,
press the button.
On your app, press your button, your location is there, it comes, identifies you, and instructs what are the next steps. And just in
defined routes?
No.
Really?
And we all know who are the big players that are working it. And it reminds me of, the moment when the day WhatsApp launched the feature of voice call, and the headline on Financial Times was billions billions moved out from circuit switch world into data world. And this is the same universe we're living in. It's going to be another big feature set that's going to be activating our cars to be pretty much autonomous. Where is that infrastructure?
Can I ask you a little favor?
Absolutely.
Next time you go and use it, can you do like a little short video blog?
I'm going to share
and
with
drop
you.
it back in.
Absolutely.
That would be
I actually have one, which I'm going to share with you. Yeah, you would love it.
Okay, fantastic.
And so the thing that we also notice, and we're working very closely with the cities of Phoenix and Mesa, building out infrastructure with our technologies, is you already see the demand of small cells littering literally the streetscape. Every few hundred meters, you would see the poles standing up and holding small cell antennas. And that's a difficult infrastructure to extrapolate. So you really need to re-innovate your thinking. What these innovations that are not anymore in far distant future, they're happening as we speak today. And it's only a matter of time how quickly it's scaling up. Down here in our backyards, it's going to be a reality very sooner than later. So for me, those are kind of eye-opening innovations that when I see them living in real world, and you're like, wow, we're not far away.
No, that's great. Pace of change is clearly a really big thing.
Yeah.
And advent of quantum computing kind of only makes it quicker. And so there's a lot. And your big innovation, the big mind blower for you, Jim?
I don't even know where to start because there's been so much. But you kind of look at the innovation related to artificial intelligence, and there's all these different use cases. But the thing that I was showing a colleague of mine this in the car on the ride over here. In my Android phone now, I can actually run an AI-based interpreter. So I can actually speak in English, and it will live translate to Japanese in speech. Well, the text will come up, and you can do dozens of different languages, and it's actually running on the phone.
Yep.
And again, app-based?
Yeah. But
Do you want to name drop the app?
Well, you know what? It's fascinating because you can also use it while you're on a telephone. So if I ring someone up and they were, I let's say my French is a little rusty, you talk. It's like an interpreter. You say in English, "This is what I would like to say," and you have to pause, and it goes into French, and then they answer in French, and they pause, and it comes out in
That's right.
English
But if it's
on my
native,
cell
yeah.
phone while I'm talking
Wow.
real time, and it's all done in the phone. Not even because historically a lot of that processing, the big hyperscalers bring it all back to a data center.
Exactly.
And data center power consumption is a huge problem right now. So being able to actually localize that process and run it in something like a cell phone was pretty amazing to me.
That's amazing.
Mm.
Those are great. Those are three things that I'm not sure many people will be, even in our domain, right, will be as aware of. So thank you very much for sharing those. Those are brilliant. So this segment is all about leadership and personal insights, and I'm going to do this on every single podcast. Great opportunity to get great leaders such as yourselves of fantastic companies to share insights about key moments in your career, challenges, your personal development journey, and your leadership approach. So it's the first time we've done this segment. We're going to do it all the time going forwards. So let's hear your words of wisdom.
So maybe, Pat, since it's the first one, and let me take the liberty to actually put that to you. You are leading the organization that is a critical part of United Kingdom, Ireland's digital infrastructure. You've seen many similar industry roles. Give us a bit of an insight on your personal journey. What are the things that really stood out for you? What are those values that have brought you here, and how you're going to take this organization to live beyond those, alongside those values?
You see, I think that's cheating. But I'll go with it. I think I have probably a slightly different career journey to most people. I didn't go to university. I didn't do a degree. I went into the army at the age of 18. And the army was an incredible experience of sort of real live leadership. And you get put in situations that force you to think dynamically. You have to be very conscious of all the people around you in situations that will be very challenging for them and very challenging for you yourself. So you learn to think dynamically, you learn to act dynamically. There's some brilliant stuff in military leadership about the way you communicate what you're trying to achieve, outcome-based goal setting, which we think is a business thing that's created by consultants, but it's been in the military for a very, very long time. And so all that's very transferable. I really enjoyed that and traveled the world, and I got to work with a lot of people from a lot of very, very different backgrounds. And then I came into what is now a slightly more sort of classic career, in business. And I've taken particularly the cultural and value-based importance of leadership and the sort of care of the organization and its culture and the people in it with me. And that's probably been the thing that I found most powerful actually on my journey. You can do a lot of stuff. You can do an MBA, you can develop your commercial skills, you can learn to be strategic, you can do a lot of that stuff. But at the end of the day, there's kind of one reason really why our companies are successful, and that is because you create cultures that enable people to do amazing stuff. And that's my big thing.
I think that's very impressive, and sometimes it really boils down to very fundamental, simple principles. But actually, living those principles inspires a very large set of your organization to be part of that trusted culture itself.
Yeah, and there's another little bit of it. And again, we're in the room, together, and we like working with people who have similar approaches and similar cultures, right? And who want to be successful. And you talked about your software team who are based in the UK, Jim. And a lot of people don't have their software teams based in the UK, but you've got yours here. And when I meet people from your team, they've got a really nice sort of dynamic and culture around them. And we touched earlier in the pod about ecosystems and collaboration. Everyone comes in with a collaborative mindset. It's not necessarily something that exists everywhere, and it's a genuine pleasure to work with people who think and act in the same way. And what about you guys? So key moments or things that inspired you, or great leadership challenges that you learned a lot from.
If I may share my view around that and my leadership journey or the principles from that perspective. I think from the very get-go of the career, I tend to now, when I share with my daughter who's turned 18, and I want to see how the world looks from a future perspective, my view has been that things that actually stand out are, once you see problems, raise your hand to solve. Don't wait for others to solve it.
Yeah.
Second, be obsessed with learning. Change is much faster than we actually recognize. And stay humble and simple to your core values. That's what a true leader who is inside out and outside in, if you don't have a lot of different shades around that, makes life a lot easier for people that work with you and your own leadership as well. And for me, those core things really help to define how in different organizations, in different industries, I've embraced the uncomfortable aspects of change. But I think those areas of remaining uncomfortable allows you to learn a lot, fail, and get back on your feet again very soon and pick it up from there. Couple of learnings on that part.
That's great. Jim?
Great. I wrote a book a long time ago called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. It's a fascinating book. He's a historian, philosopher, but he looked at the evolution of technology and innovation throughout history. And it's very clear that that's not a linear path. They're very stable, and all of a sudden something happens and it totally changes everything you thought about in the world, right? So you start to look at that, and there's been different times in history when you had those big inflection points. Isaac Newton got hit in the head with an apple, invented calculus and Newtonian physics and all that kind of stuff. You think about Einstein, and totally tipped the apple cart upside down with an entirely new way of looking at the world. So, I think as a leader, understanding that things don't evolve in a linear fashion, and that when you see that disruption and you see that big discontinuity, being able to identify it and embrace it and figure out how, okay, we always did it this way, but now we can't continue to do it that way. And think about just before COVID, we would fly all over the place and everything. And now I spend most of my day on video conferences. It gets to be kind of old at one point, but you think about that. That's just such a fundamental change in the way people communicate and the way that you run businesses. And you can then have very distributed organizations. I have people all over the place. We don't really have, other than Marlowe, we have quite a few people, but we have people in Chicago and Boston and Seattle and Dallas, all over in London. I used to have people in Asia as well. And we would get on that conversation like we were in the same room, right? I mean, that to me was just like technology disruptor that totally changed the way we were running our businesses. And is AI the next one? Is that the one that totally tipped the apple cart upside down? Maybe. But that's how things evolve. They don't just, it's like from point A to point B is not a straight line typically.
Yeah. Another section, which is going to be in the pod every time we record one, and it's similar to the personal insights, is a piece of advice for anyone coming into work around leadership. What would your kind of one biggest, most powerful piece of advice be? And you can't turn this one around. Not going to allow that to happen.
I lost my chance then.
One of my mentors once told me that when you make a decision, if you make that decision on the basis that you're going to own this forever or have to live with that forever, you probably make the right decision. So many times when you're trying to make decisions, you'll say, oh, I don't want to do that because I don't like I remember one time we were building up a company in a private equity business, and their ERP system was a disaster. And we said, oh, we should put something better in. And they're like, oh, whoever buys this company is gonna rip it all out and redo it anyway. So why are we spending any money on this right now? And it turns out that the person that ended up buying that, the company that ended up buying it, the way we did our accounting and everything and our project management was very different than the way they did it. And they wanted to replicate that, and they couldn't do it within their existing ERP system. So, it was a short-term cost savings. If I had said, you know what, let's assume I'm going to own this business for the next 10 years, the right thing to do would be to upgrade that. And, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong, but overall, I found that to be pretty good advice.
And I'll build on Jim's comment. I think part of the core strength of a strong leadership is integrity. And when I say integrity is a lot of people look up to you and need your guidance, and you may not have the answers, but at least the ability to take every possible measure and effort that you need to put in to solve the problem that you see, I think that brings a lot of integrity, credibility to leadership. And my advice, as you asked Pat, is always connecting with the fact that, raise your hand when you see the problem. Don't sit at the back of the pack, but then stay credible to make absolute maximum effort. Be guaranteed that failure is going to be there. Because if success was guaranteed, everybody would do it. For leaders, failures are more often the guarantees than successes, and hence, I think that aspect of bringing that integrity in your approach makes a very strong credibility around leadership.
Thank you. Thanks for those. They were great. I was trying to think about what mine might be, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure how relevant it was, but in the military, certainly once I got commissioned, there was a phrase which was used, which was, "Don't run, sir. It panics the troops." And what it expressed was the need for calmness and the need, a little bit like you were both saying, to just take your time, be rational about the way you think about business problems, think about them in a multifaceted way, think about the human aspect, think about the financial aspect, think about the strategic aspect. You can process that super fast. It doesn't take a long time, but just kind of be calm and considerate. And I think your point, Jim, is there's a big thing about adaptability. And you can be adaptable in the moment and it can look like a knee jerk, or you can be adaptable with a short breath and it looks calm and it looks collected and it looks like, you're in control, and it creates, I think, an impression of confidence. People are confident that you're making good choices, and business leadership is, I think, fundamentally about kind of good choices. Make good choices.
Absolutely.
So we're coming towards the end of the pod, but before we finished, we touched on a lot of serious topics, and I think it's been really thoughtful. We're going to have a regular section going forwards, which will be a quickfire Q&A. So this is an opportunity for us to fire quickfire one-word answers at each other.
Oh, right.
So
interesting.
I will start with Jim. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
You get one now. It's your turn.
Yeah, okay. So Pat, football or rugby?
Rugby. Khalid.
Yes.
Holiday, snow or sand?
Oh, tough one. Snow. Cat or a dog?
That is a properly tough one.
Yeah.
Cat.
Oh.
Yeah. I might hit you back with hamster or gerbil. Now let me go. Going out of an evening, smart or casual?
Smart.
Oh, really? Okay.
Always.
I sounded too surprised there. Oh, really? I should have just gone, okay, of course.
Yeah. Mountains or beaches?
Mountains.
Mountains.
Nice.
Hiking or bicycle?
Hiking. Okay. Apple or Samsung?
Apple any day. Yes.
Okay.
Well, if that's the flow, it's Mac or Windows.
Windows.
Yeah,
I don't want to
Okay.
be in the. I don't want to be in the playpen.
that's true.
We might have to cut that out.
Okay. Just being honest.
Wind or nuclear?
Okay, nuclear, because
Okay.
it's base load. I built my share of wind farms, and the wind doesn't blow all the time. It usually blows when you don't need the electricity in the middle of the night. So, nuclear, I think, is a better solution.
Okay, very good. Khalid, alien life or no alien life?
Life on Mars.
You think life on Mars?
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. That didn't really answer the question though. So, well, it kind of does. You were like alien life.
You know where
That'll be amazing.
You know where it goes, yeah.
Yeah, that'll be amazing. Yeah. Can I ask you the same one? Life or no life out there?
Definitely.
That's very.
The reason I say that is one of my hobbies is astronomy, and when you look at how vast the universe is, and we can't be the only instance of this kind of life form, right? There's just no way.
I'm with you. It's life.
Statistically, it's not.
It's not possible.
Absolutely.
It's life.
Yeah.
It's just when.
It's just.
It's literally just when. I know there's probably a lot of people out there who might listen to the pod and go, no, that's not right. And throw stuff at you, but it just can't be.
It just can't be. Yeah.
Okay, that was a good one.
I have one for you, Pat. Military or corporate?
Oh, that is tough. Am I allowed to say both?
Give your reasoning.
They're both, genuinely, they were both brilliant. You know, they both given very different things. The military was, you know, these amazing leadership experiences and a sense of comradeship and joint purpose that is quite hard to find, right? You are absolutely bound together. Loads of sport, loads of traveling, all that kind of stuff. That was brilliant. But corporate life is a more I find it more of an interesting challenge. The dynamics of what we do change all the time. A lot of externalities to deal with. No, it's both. It's
interesting
both.
Perspective.
Yeah.
So, being a tower guy, what's your favorite stealth tower installation?
We've got a few trees here in the UK. There's a few hidden away.
They look like trees, or
yeah, they look like trees. Yeah. So they've been built and they've got branches sticking off them, and we're not great in the UK at stealth towers. My favourite tower was built by the guys at VMO2 actually as part of the shared rural network, and it is at 1,000 meters, just over 1,000 meters up in Scotland. It's an incredible thing.
Amazing.
Great feat of engineering.
Wow.
Yeah.
And my favorite one is a large fiberglass boulder that has antennas in it on the 14th fairway at Pebble Beach Golf Course.
Really?
And it's even painted like a Northern California rock.
Really? Okay.
Some creativity in those.
Yeah. I'm sure there's the guys at Vantage built a sort of wooden clad tower which looks amazing, and it was in an area of outstanding natural beauty in Germany, and so they had to kind of clad this thing in pine in the middle of a pine forest, and that looks incredible. And it's got a viewing station.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a good one. And there's a big, we're into towers now. I could talk for hours. There's one in what was formerly, what is now Berlin, which is owned by Deutsche Funkturm, and it's an incredible sort of, whether it still is or not, formerly a TV tower. You know, the one that's real tall spike with a little bubble in there. Yeah, amazing.
We one looked like a Wild West water tower on a very high-end horse ranch in Southern California.
Oh, really? Yeah. What, like the old school water
like
towers
from the old Western movies, like a water tower. And it had FRP around the outside with all the antennas inside.
Okay.
But no, that's a fun topic.
What is the place that you've been to in your life where you've just gone, wow?
Wow, or oh no? Or, well, the other direction, like, I can't believe I'm here. This is not good.
Yeah. Have you been somewhere that is just jaw dropping?
When I look at all my travels, I think for the last 18 years are recorded on my kayak app, 16 years at
Oh,
least.
okay.
So it says 47 times to the moon and back. So I've
Wow.
been to a lot of places that are just jaw-dropping at times. But I think the most exciting, if you would say, was I would recall two. One was the travel to Baghdad. That was both jaw-dropping and very thrilling. And one was Rio, where it's a world where you know when you go in and you know when you come out, but you don't really know exactly how fantastic the time in between went through. Right? So, yeah, quite exciting times.
That sounds amazing. That sounds amazing. I mean, mine was every day of the week, Nepal, and going up to the Annapurnas, and you travel up through, and you get up to the Annapurnas, and you get up to base camp, and you're at about 4,300 meters, and you wake up in the morning, the sun rises, and it turns the mountains orange. And that sort of orange light slowly makes its way down, and you realise that at 4,300 meters, you are only halfway there.
That's true. Yeah.
And you see the 6 or the 7 Annapurnas, and they're another same again. Yeah, it's incredible.
And this was
and then you get a headache.
Yeah, of course, you're on a different.
I was trekking. I was doing a water distribution project, so working out how to get water into the villages down from the mountainside. So yeah, it was amazing.
Okay, so I would say it was in Madeira. So it's an island off of Portugal.
Yeah.
It's subtropical, very few tourists. And all the water comes from they have a network of what's called levadas in Portuguese. And they're little like trenches along the side of the mountain where they capture the water and route it back to the capital. But you can hike along these and you like walk underneath waterfalls and things. And it's pretty amazing. And it's not touristy at all. And it was fascinating. It was not what I expected in the least, but it's not far from here.
Yeah,
GB Airways, I think.
Is that the one where you sort of fly along nice and straight and then it nosedives down into the airline?
I think they've changed it now.
Oh,
At the time, it was they sent quite a few planes into the sea.
There. The end of the sea.
Yeah.
This runway wasn't
maybe a little bit later.
Like the old, Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think when you were talking about it, it's so fascinating. I think one of the best learnings of life is the exposure of travels, and it's an amazing teacher. Right?
I completely agree.
Every single time you're just fascinated by the beauty of the diverse cultures, civilizations, places, nature. It's incredibly powerful.
Completely with you. Completely with you. Well, look, thank you both very much indeed for being my first guests on this podcast. It's been absolutely brilliant. You've been inspiring and insightful and really interesting to talk to. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about what we do for a living. We talked about neutralized radio. We talked about how we think connectivity is going to evolve over time. Talked about the importance of data. We talked about the importance of security. We explored a little bit about your leadership journeys and key moments for you. And what you value in your roles and in your life. And we touched a little bit on some really interesting topics in that last Quickfire Q&A. So look, a massive thank you. I really hope that everyone who listens to the pod enjoys the time that we spent together as much as I have.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.